The diner was abnormally quiet that morning, the sort of quiet where even the gentle ring of a coffee cup sounded too harsh. Golden light poured through the big front windows, reflecting off chrome tabletops and glinting through glass salt shakers. In the corner booth, Walter Branson sat reading, an 81-year-old Korean War veteran who'd been sitting here at 8:15 every morning for as long as anyone could recall. He wore his favorite flannel shirt, which was thinned at the elbows, and a pair of heavy boots that had made it through more winters than most men at the diner had spent on the planet. His hands shook a little as he raised his black coffee, but his eyes, weary but firm, still contained the quiet resolve of a man who had, at one time, confronted the atrocities of war without wincing, and then, in an instant heartbeat, that serene morning was shattered. At the far end of the room, a young man with a broad back and a nasty frown was having a shouting match with the waitress over his check. His words grew louder, harsh and unpleasant, and bounced off the walls of tile. Then, unexpectedly, he saw Walter sitting silently in his booth. Something about the old man's serene, unflinching stare must have hit a nerve, or perhaps it pierced his pride. In a flash of fury, the man bawled across and slapped Walter in the face. The report rang through the diner like a gunshot. Cups clinked. People died. For a moment, the entire room stood as one. Walter did not resist. He did not scream. He merely brought up his shaking hand to cover his cheek, not shocked by the hurt, but by the brutality behind it. If you hold dear kindness, respect for our ancestors, and the potential of second chances, take a moment to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Real Kindness Stories. Your contribution allows us to share strong, true stories that restore faith in humanity. The diner fell into an uncomfortable silence. The waitress, trembling, implored the man to get out. Other patrons avoided eye contact, too afraid to step in. Walter sat, his calloused hand against the forming bruise on his cheek. He wasn't fearful. Fear had no room anymore in a man who'd witnessed war. His heart did hurt, though, not for himself, but for humanity, which had forgotten things as simple as respect. Minutes ticked by, then an hour. Walter remained where he was, part fatigue, part habit, and partly because there was no place to go. The diner had always been his haven, the one spot in the world where people still addressed him as Mr. Branson and welcomed him with a smile. But that haven had just been desecrated. And then, the bell over the door to the diner rang out, a sound that made everything different. A band of men came in, and immediately, the mood had changed. They had leather vests emblazoned with large badges, tattoos curled down their arms, and their boots thudded to the floor with heft and intent. They were Hell's Angels. At the head was a tall man, among the rest, his beard streaked with grey and his eyes like steel. He looked about the room, and when his eyes fell on Walter, there flashed across his face a look of recognition. That was Thomas Branson, Walter's son. The thug who had punched Walter was still present, chuckling by the counter, oblivious to what was going to happen next. But Thomas noticed the bruise on his father's face, and the instant he did, his jaw clenched. The other bikers noticed as well, and in that diner of silence and terror, the atmosphere began to crackle. Something was going to shift. The diner was holding its breath. All eyes were watching, all muscles were tight, waiting to determine if violence would break out once more. But Thomas did not rush or yell. He walked instead, purposefully, towards his father's booth. Without saying a word, he sat down across from Walter and softly laid his hard, calloused hand over his father's shaking one. For a long, silent moment, the two men simply sat there, not saying a word, but conveying volumes in the silence. Walter gazed at the man his son had become, formidable, devoted, and unyielding. He had once held this same man as a weeping boy in his arms. Now that boy had become a man the world feared and respected. Walter had wrestled for years with trying to make sense of his son's way. The leather, the motorcycle, the hard-living crowd. It had come between them. But at that moment, none of that made a difference. Blood did. Over in the corner, the thug finally got a clue about who the new arrivals were. He gave a nervous laugh and sneered, "What's this? You need your gang to guard you, old man." He puffed his chest out, attempting to appear brave. The tension in the diner grew, yet Thomas remained sitting, unruffled, unmoving. At his back, the other bikers stood in complete silence, their presence heavy enough to cause even the air around them to feel electric. Then Thomas said something. His voice was low and even, filled with a stillness that made everyone pay attention. "The guy you struck," he told him, "is my father, an 81-year-old veteran who contributed more to this nation than you will ever make. And you're tough because you slapped him." The thug's smile faded. He glanced around, seeing that every set of eyes in the diner was now focused on him. The waitress, the patrons, the bikers, all staring silently. The shame was more crushing than any blow could have been. Thomas never raised his fist. He didn't have to. His words were enough with the kind of power that is derived from love rather than rage. The thug retreated slowly, some curse murmured under his breath before he slammed through the door and out into the sunlight. No one pursued. His shame would pursue him further than any man could. Walter finally breathed. Tension evaporated from his shoulders, and a weak, exhausted smile creased his face for the first time that morning. His son had defended him, not with aggression, but with honor and respect. Decades of estrangement seemed to disappear in that one gesture. The waitress came back with 2 new cups of coffee, her hands still shaking a bit. "Thank you," she barely breathed to Thomas and his group. Throughout the diner, the fear dissipated. Folks started to whisper quietly, as if sun had just pierced darkening clouds. Some went so far as to come over to Walter to apologize and speak words of respect for not standing up earlier. Walter gazed at his son with watery eyes and softly said, "I fought my wars a long time ago, Thomas, but nothing is as much of a battle as keeping your family together." Thomas nodded, feeling a glimmer of emotion in his toughened features. For all the years they'd lost, in that instant, they remembered what was important. After that day, the diner was more than a breakfast establishment. It became a source of healing, a sign of reconciliation. Walter and Thomas saw each other there frequently, sometimes accompanied by Thomas's biker brother, who treated the old war vet with great respect. Every time Walter walked through that door, the customers remembered. They remembered the morning when cruelty met compassion and lost, when a father and son found their way back to each other through loyalty and love. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Real Kindness Stories, and share it with someone who believes in the power of love and redemption. And before you leave, I want to hear from you. Do you think kindness can mend fractured family? Leave a comment below. Your words may just give hope to someone who needs it today. Walter Branson spent his remaining days in peace, no longer isolated veteran sitting alone in the corner booth, but father who discovered his son again in the unlikeliest of fashion. And for all who saw the day, the diner became something more than memory. It became a reminder that despite the world's cruelty, respect, loyalty, and love will always prevail.